Everything we know, from people and ants to stars and galaxies to quarks and atoms, the entire universe, might just be a simulation running inside a supercomputer inside an even bigger universe. Ancient philosophers said that the universe is a dream that we're waiting to wake up from. In this dream world of the imagination, anything is possible. All cultural items, from the dreams of our rodent-like ancestors, to books, to television shows, are merely permutations of the reality we think we live in. Today's age of computers and video games places simulations at the center of our cultural consciousness. A select group of us perform simulations for fun and profit, and we call them games, role-playing and otherwise. We live to run simulations. Join us on the Simulationist podcast as we explore our culture of simulations. Hello all you people out there in podcast land. We're doing another episode of the Simulationist.
This marks episode 8, or podcast 8. Do we call them episodes?
I think I've been calling them episodes, but we could come up with another, fun word for them. Simulations. Simulation 8.
Simulation 008. 2-month anniversary.
If only you guys could see Ryan's twitching head, or whatever it is you're doing.
I'm trying to mock Captain Kirk. I find when he talks, he does a lot of chin movements.
I don't know. Emulating William Shatner's acting style, I'm not sure if that's the best way to go about.
Have you seen his house these days? You could do worse if you wind up like him by imitating him. Also, he's got that nice television series, Weird or What?
That's true.
Seen that?
Have I seen it? I've seen a William Shatner series with some things like the bloop and.
Well, this is actually interesting because they cover the standard basics for cryptology and cryptozoology. Like he talks about Bigfoot, and then people say, "Oh, Bigfoot's from outer space," and they say, "Bigfoot's from another dimension. He's really like some sort of spirit creature." And then they have someone who knows what common sense is and comes out and explains it. Oh, Bigfoot would represent this sort of style here, and he's really likely to this. People are also likely misinterpreting a bear on its hind legs when they're highly panicked in many cases. So you can't always take every Bigfoot sighting as a Bigfoot sighting. And then he goes, "Weird or what?" And he lets you decide whether you want to listen to crazy people or listen to knowledgeable experts in the field. And I think that marks it as maybe one of the classier styles of the I don't know, would this be considered somewhat fictional accounts or fictional creatures?
Well, I guess, cryptids are in their own category. I would definitely consider them fictional, but they have, mythological works.
Mytho-archetypical?
Mytho-archetypical. Well, I guess if you want to...
Well, because stuff like Bigfoot works over with the Yeti, and then you've got various other creatures throughout the various areas of the world. So they clearly seem to represent an archetype, rather than just, this is a big hairy animal that lives in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of different names for them. Over in Florida, they call them skunk apes, because they stink so very badly. Apparently, you have to name it around, an animal that smells.
Yeah. Well, a Bigfoot and the Yeti and all those, are they something left over in us from the days when we had Neanderthal cousins on the same continent?
I found this interesting theory that, picture this, as I take the mind of a person from, we'll say the 1500s, staunch medieval mindset, and then we'll take the mind of a person from the modern day. Now, of course, we haven't evolved much in the last 500 years, if you can be said that we evolved at all in that time. Basically, everything's about the same as it was back then.
On a, if you were to look at a person, like
societally, yes, we have evolved. But
stand at arm's length from a person and look at them, yeah.
Yeah, if you were to do visual testing, technically you could get like a cave person from back when, have them, as like a baby raised up in modern society. Technically, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's society that's changed. And so that's the main thing. So,
well, I also wanted to point out that we've also changed on a
microscopic, like a genetic level, like certain.
Well, some frequencies have changed, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm talking like Homo sapiens before we did stuff like agriculture. We were still the same species back then.
That's true.
So clearly, the only thing that's changed between a man from the 1500s and a man from the 2100s or 2000s, whenever you're going to picture, any time in the foreseeable future, as we know it, it's going to be effectively the same person. Even genetic testing won't allow you to say this person is not from this part of the timeline.
Oh, okay. I kind of thought that it would, but I might be wrong about that.
No. You might be able to argue that this is a rare allele that's not frequently seen here, but that's kind of iffy.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, like if you take like an English person from the 1500s and an English person from now, genetically, not anything you can say is distinguishable.
Okay.
So the only difference between the minds is how they grew up, the frame of their society then. So what if there are certain areas in our minds that are hard-coded, concepts that are always there, but our perception of them and how we see them is tainted, however you want to see it, tainted, good enough either way,
Okay.
by society and how we view it. So this one we'll call basic mental lump for you and I would be a Sasquatch. For someone from the 1500s, they might see it as a representation of the Green Man. They are both a human-type figure living out in the wild very mysteriously.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
And so in that way, you don't even need Bigfoot or Sasquatch to be real. It's your interpretation of something that is very fundamental to the human mind. Your perception of it is however, changed by something such as the world you grew up in.
Yeah. And I guess that's why we're saying it's not, I mean, we're not saying it's fiction, even though, like, aspects of Bigfoot clearly are fiction. But some parts of the idea are not fiction in that they are so, like, they're mythological. They're so ingrained in our lizard brain or whatever that it's there is something real there. I mean, it's not an actual creature maybe, but there is some.
Well, in some cases it is an actual creature, but a person who has had, like an encounter of something off the side of the road on a rainy night, they just, hit the brakes hard and their car did like a 720 around, and then, oh my God, their heart's beating a mile a minute, and then they see something big and hairy standing up looking at them. They don't see a bear. They go back and they interpret, oh, Bigfoot. It's a Bigfoot sighting. Despite the fact if you were to, have it from a rational scientific mindset, this was an unknown creature of appropriate this height, showing a shaggy furred appearance. Ultimate version of the events, unknown. It's the human brain trying to make sense, and then you get everything tainted by who you are and what you grew up around.
Well, okay, so, like, the bear, you see a bear, but the reason you interpret it as a Bigfoot might be because, the night before you had just been watching a Bigfoot program on TV or something like that.
Yes, compounded with something such as your heart's beating and your brain is basically saying, what was that? So you're thinking, something's going on, what's going on? It's something unknown. And then your brain switches, unknown things, I'm in the woods. There are Bigfoots out in the woods. Oh no!
But this is what's really weird to me about Bigfoot is, I don't understand because it affects me this way too, because the idea of Bigfoot is kind of fascinating and it arrests your heart and stuff, but why doesn't the idea of a bear do that? Like, why doesn't a bear, like a big brown stinky grizzly bear that can eat you, and it lives in the forest and it's real, and it's just absolutely a horrifying creature, a bear. Like, Stephen Colbert calls them godless killing machines. It's true, and why don't we have that same kind of fear?
Well, there's several different ways about that. One, a bear is considered a known quantity. Even if you really don't know a lot about bears, you know of bears as a concept. So when you're thinking, something weird is going on, you don't think, bears messing with me. You think, giant hairy creature, Bigfoot, mysterious thing going on. Alternatively, if you want to look at it from just an evolutionary-based standpoint, bears are actually a fairly more recent creature than for humans to interact with than, say, something like the Neanderthals. So whereas the concept of like a hairy proto-human could be stuck in our brains as we're interpreting it throughout different ways throughout the history, we don't have the same connection with bears.
Okay, and I guess, yeah, a bear isn't, I mean...
Mind you, of course, for anyone listening, bear as a recent thing is on a very different time scale than what you and I might consider recent. Okay. This is an evolutionarily recent.
I'm basically taking your word on that, because I don't know when humans would have first encountered bears. I'm imagining, they must have encountered giant ground sloths, or something like that.
Oh, well, let's see. If you work things back out from the path of where humans apparently wandered as they left Africa, there are no bears in Africa, to the best of my knowledge.
Right.
So it would have had to have been sometime after that. Whereas for the evolution of humanity has been going on apparently in there for about 2 million years. So the alternative of like this is something hairy like us, but it is not us, was being there for a decent amount of time. Because remember, throughout a lot of what we assume we know about the evolutionary history of humanity and pre-humanity, it's not just the one thing leading to another thing. There's several branching paths. All but one tends to wind up truncated by circumstance and a rock to the back of the forehead.
Sure. I want to... Wait, the back of the forehead?
I assume.
That's a really hard blow, I guess. It has to go right through the back of the forehead.
Well, we and our ancestors have never been the most peaceful of species. And we, compete against our cousin species, as it was. And may explain why we're so hardwired to hurting other things that look like people.
Yeah, well, and we hurt other human beings, and it's only recently that the human species as a we've had this mass movement against racism, and we've kind of figured out that there's no science behind racism. But I think for most of human history, we've basically been racist. I guess it's been tried.
That's the thing. Really. It may wind up having been a very good thing for us initially. If you were to accept this cousin species that you cannot reproduce with, then, oh no, you have fallen in love with something you cannot have children with. Your lineage ends here. But if you
I'm sure that humans and Neanderthals were...
In this case, yes, but there have been several offshoots which we assume the interbreeding may not have been quite available as an option. And actually, there's some interesting things about whether or not Neanderthals actually did interbreed with humans. There's some weird stuff. The scientists are still working out the details and the odds and the mathematics. Remember, everybody, science does not happen overnight. This isn't a CSI type thing where you can get a full DNA profile in the time it takes you to get a cup of coffee.
Although in the future...
In the future, yes, we are always progressing to faster, better results, but as it currently stands, there's a lot of number crunching, statistics crunching to be done. But yes, anyways, as I was saying, So if you wind up being, like effectively racist, I guess technically it'd be speciesist in this case, with the different offshoots of humanity and pre-humanity.
Right. Well, but my point,
you're killing off something that's competing for your resources by this weird thing that becomes ingrained. Looks like you, but not quite. Kill it. I don't think it's good, especially nowadays, but at least it gives a logical reasoning behind it. Because otherwise, there's really not a lot of logic behind racism.
And what I was trying to say before, too, is that as modern people, we put very strong distinctions between, this is human, this is Neanderthal, and this is Homo, whatever, etc., etc. But I wonder...
Homo erectus.
Homo erectus, there we go.
The one everybody has snickered at, so we'll use that.
But I have to imagine that, if you go to the mindset of a tribesman of that era, or tribeswoman, they probably didn't necessarily see a sharp divide between Homo sapiens and the other Homo species. they probably saw neighboring tribes as almost as alien as what we consider different species.
And that technically works out too, because the people in the neighboring tribe would be competing for the same resources. So it works heavily ingrained. I think the best term for it is, let's see, an enlightened sense of who comes first. It's you, it's your loved ones, it's your family, it's the people, associated with your family, and then everyone else kind of goes on elsewhere, lower down on the scale, so to speak. And so it works out better in more primitive times for you to say, you know what, you're probably just as good a person as I am, but I'm still going to fight you to the death so I can have more meat next year.
Okay, I like that story. I wonder, I guess this is the whole point of cultural relativism, is that, that was a big mouthful that I just said.
But very nicely done, thank you.
Now I'll try to explain it. Is this idea that, our kind of, I feel that my values of not harming other people and not being a racist and, kind of this modern sensibility.
Or even prejudicial, I suppose.
Yeah, trying to avoid prejudice and trying to be an overall moral person in a modern age and egalitarian and all these other ideals. I feel like if I were to encounter a primitive person, I would probably want, and I think I'm right for wanting this, but I would want to impose those values on them. I would want to say, this is the best way to live with equality and being nice. And
but here's the thing. It works very well for you and I, but it might not necessarily work well for them in their situation. It's one of those weird circumstances where, depending on where you are, how you operate winds up being better for competition. For instance, Warren Buffett, one of the richest men on earth. He does investments and winds up affecting entire trends.
Yep, Warren Buffett.
Yes, he himself has said that if you were to strip him of all his identity and put him in, say, India with no money, he would die, most likely. And if he was to get anywhere, he'd likely be working very harshly, minimum wage, would not make a profit, because what he knows and his skills and his thought patterns, his morals, don't work the same way. They are not guaranteed to make him the billionaire he is.
Oh, that's interesting and kind of weird, because I've heard the opposite anecdote told by certain millionaires or billionaires, and I wish I could give a name, but unfortunately I don't have a name associated with it. But there was a millionaire who said something to the effect of, strip me of all my money, drop me in a foreign country, and I will learn the language and I will get myself a job and I'll work my way to the top, because that's what I am.
Well, that's a different thing, though. This would clearly be one of the self-made millionaires, we'll say Scrooge McDuck type, who has earned his fortune through hard work.
Well, maybe
or at least he likes to think himself.
I think that's his perception of himself. It's not necessarily correct.
Warren Buffett, however, knows his genius, his skills lie in knowing market trends, which doesn't help you a lot when you're on the back streets of Calcutta. Sad but true. And it's always nice to see a person who's done so well acknowledge that they've done well because they had the right skill in the right place.
Oh, yeah, and, that's a good point.
So getting back to the whole thing is this primitive person you may somehow meet through, we'll say a time machine you happen to have, your enlightened attitude works well for you, but it might not work well for him in his situation. If you were to bring, the tribesmen here and say, okay, now you don't have to hunt and you don't have to worry about the resources in the same way, you may have to do some apartment hunting, but it's not the same thing. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to hate people just because they're not like you.
Well, let's take it this way. What if I went back to Bible times,
and
I met Moses, and I said, "Hey Moses, you got a great thing going on with the Ten Commandments.
Because you do know Aramaic.
Oh, well, I'd have to learn the language.
Okay, we'll say you learn the Aramaic and then you go it.
Is that, yeah. Moses.
Oh, no, wait, I suppose he actually knew Hebrew.
Moses.
Yeah, just go with old Hebraic. You can have some fun with that.
Well, he lived in Egypt and in Israel, so he might have known a couple languages. I don't know.
Well, he was Hebrew, so
he
that
was
means...
brought up in the Egyptian court, wasn't he? Well, he's probably never even existed, so...
No, I think there's enough evidence we can say he probably
Okay.
existed in some form.
Well, I
maybe not as great as some people make him out to be, but he probably existed in some form.
Okay, I'll grant
the Egyptians
that.
say something happened like that, so...
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
So
yes, you're talking to him.
I'm talking to him, and he's got these great ideas. He's like, this Yahweh guy, he's told me all this great stuff about how we're not supposed to kill each other. Oh, revolutionary.
Well, I think technically the term was murder as opposed to kill.
Yeah.
It's okay to kill somebody if you didn't intend to. Like some guy mugs you and you accidentally crack his skull open. Oops, haha, you still get to go to heaven. But if you're the guy in the alleyway thinking, okay, I think I'm going to just slit this guy's throat, take his money, and then I'm off. Well, that earns you a trip to hell because you thought it out beforehand. There's some interesting stuff on that if you go into the deep studies of what the particular word meant as opposed to synonyms.
Okay.
But yes, continue. Yeah. It is a good idea not to kill people, just on general principle, I believe. So yes.
Yeah, I think they had execution for certain crimes or whatever. Okay, so
poisoning people.
So
that was a different one.
So yeah, I get to go back and I get to talk to Moses and I get to, as a modern person, couldn't I basically make the whole maybe I couldn't. I guess that's my question for people to ponder is whether a modern person with modern ideas could actually make a beneficial influence on Moses writing his book of laws.
Well, let's see. There is something to be said about what was called steps. No one person ever winds up just waking up one day and all of a sudden, oh, I'm as nasty as Hitler. No, you take gradual steps from being a decent human being to doing this little thing. Okay, we'll ignore Godwin's law that I've already invoked and just go with murder in this case. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and just suddenly murder someone. It's not in you, is it? I hope. Knock on wood. There we go. Just so everyone heard it, I knocked on wood. He's not going to start killing people tomorrow. But let's think about this. Could you see yourself killing someone in self-defense? Could you see yourself harming another person if it meant your own survival?
Yes, and unfortunately, yes.
And so some people can't. Some people have to think of just being rude to other people. And so it works along what can be seen as a series of stairs. Harming another person through minor ways, such as just being rude, to, physical altercations. Just like, oh, this person's going all weird, I gotta, hold them down to make sure they don't hurt anyone else. To, this person's gonna, freak out, I better crack them one in the jaw and just knock them unconscious, hopefully now. To, I'm gonna murder this guy. So it's a step program. So you can say societally it might not work the same way. If you were to go back into the biblical times with the enlightened ideas of today, it might not catch on because it's just so far removed and it's so far from where people are thinking that they can't make that sort of high-end transfer. So that's something to be said there. I don't know if I fully subscribe to that myself, however, as I do believe the human mind and its ability to change is one of the greatest things you can say about humanity. Our mental plasticity is nothing short of astounding. And even to this day, we're working on some interesting things about changing mental diseases, traumas, simply through changing our thought patterns. So instead of taking Prozac, you just think happy thoughts, and then you become ingrained with thinking happy thoughts instead of depressing thoughts. And next thing you know, you don't need Prozac because you're not depressed, because you're not thinking these depressing thoughts as a matter of basic rote, this is what I do with my spare brain power.
Ah, interesting. Well, we're not necessarily recommending this, but it's something to ask your doctor about.
There's some interesting stuff they're doing, but it involves with some drugs to help facilitate the whole thing. It also works well for traumatic memories, and they're finding in the same way. But this is all still experimental. you probably won't see this as an option for another couple years unless you can get in on the trials.
Yeah. Well, for some reason, I'm just Dianetics is coming to mind in Scientology. So I don't know.
Well, it's just one of those things that if you think a certain thing all the time, it starts becoming a force of habit. It's a mental rut, so to speak.
Okay, well, that sounds plausible to me. Yeah.
So, and what you'd have to wind up doing is get Moses and the Israelites out of their mental ruts. Yeah. Or I guess maybe perhaps better get the Egyptian pharaohs out of their odd mental ruts to quit enslaving entire groups of people. But, whatever.
And that's sort of what I'm saying, is because we say, oh, they're such bad guys because they had slaves and this and that.
That was just how things were done at the time. Slavery got stuff done, and it got stuff done cheaply, and that's how things used to work.
Well, and I guess, unfortunately, not to be a downer, but we have, our neighbor to the south has a huge prison population.
We are talking about America, by the way. We're not like Americans talking about like Mexicans. So just so you guys know out there.
And we're not Brits talking about French people.
Actually, I think the French prison population is going down from what I've read recently.
Yeah, I think
ignoring some issues about Islamism stuff going up there. There's a heavy Muslim population there, and there are some problems between the old style of living in France versus the new style. The old style people don't really like things. There's some problem, but that's probably is a topic for another podcast for a completely unrelated.
Yeah, someone else can do a podcast about that.
Yes, and if you do a podcast about something like that, please let us know. I do think a nice political what's going on sort of thing about the world would make for an interesting podcast.
So I guess my point about morality, and also like there's this idea, oh well, you shouldn't kill, or you should only kill if you have a good reason. Well, think about America and how they have their own thing going on with
in some
drone
states
strikes.
for too. They're having the I can kill you if you look like you're threatening, versus some other states that say no, killing's always wrong. Just knock it off, buddy.
Yeah, and some states have death penalty and some don't.
But yes, the drone strikes.
And the drone strikes being like basically like extra legal. Like the government doesn't ask any legal body for permission, and nobody prosecutes them. They just they're ostensibly going after bad guys, but they also kill the bad guys' wife and kids and cousins
neighbors.
And neighbors and
anybody in the blast radius.
And sometimes not the bad. Sometimes they kill the good guys. And
sometimes they have bad intelligence. Honestly, intelligence is probably where you really want to work in the future if you're anywhere in the defense industry. With better intelligence, you can do so much more. But that's just my thought. I'm a heavy on the intelligence kind of guy. The more you know what you can do.
So what was my point? My point is that there seems to still be a place, at least, if there's an argument that some people might make that doing bad stuff, like amoral stuff, is practical. Like, it's practical to kill those people over in other countries.
Kill the people shooting at you?
Well, not necessarily. That's, like, I don't understand the tactic, but apparently, there's something to it. Mainly, they're trying to go after the, leadership and stuff. Like,
oh, yes. I mean, you remove the head from any sort of intelligence or terrorism organization, and then all of a sudden everything's decentralized. Who's doing what? Nobody knows. Hard to be a threat that way.
Yeah, but the means of going after the leaders, because they're so hard to get to, because they're often protected by their community.
Because they know that's who they're aiming for, preferentially.
And so the tactic that has been adopted is, rather than invade that territory and have to fight, bloody battles.
Everybody. Go for a more surgical strike.
They do the surgical strikes, and it's like, I don't know, I definitely don't agree with that thing. I think it's amoral, it's wrong. But it seems to work.
Well, how about this? I've been told by some people in military organizations, people that have had a military history, that there's a different morality when you're at war. That yes, it's not all right to kill in peacetime, But when you're on the battlefield, and in a conflict, it is perfectly all right to shoot the other guy, because if you don't, he's going to shoot you, and then you wind up dead.
Yeah, fair enough. Although, I want to... Okay, I guess it's becoming a political... not political, per se, but it's about, war and stuff, and... Yeah. So I want to bring up... there's this Canadian kid who went over to Afghanistan, and you know who I'm talking about, Omar Khadr.
Yes.
He went over to Afghanistan. He has family who's Afghan. He's ethnically related to Afghan people.
He is of Afghan heritage.
I believe, yeah. So he goes over there, and he's caught up in this fight when he's rather young, and there's an argument as to whether or not he should be considered a child at the time, but he's basically a very young man, and he's in a situation with a firefight with Americans, and somehow the fight ends, that's what they say, the fight ends, and the medics are cleaning up after the fact and whatever, so that it's not technically a battle anymore. But this kid, I guess he's hyped up, amped up, or whatever.
Adrenaline surge.
He's been fighting the Americans, this is what he's been doing. So he's got a grenade, and he chucks it at one of the American medics, kills that medic, kills the guy, and now we're basically figuring out, in the courts, or figuring out what to do with this kid who killed an American medic when it technically wasn't a battle anymore. Is this a war? Are we in a war?
I would qualify that as not in a war, specifically if the medics were appropriately dressed to show they are non-combatants. Now, I do believe heavily in the rules of proper engagement. These people are neutrals. You don't hit them. They're helping anybody who's injured, sort of situation. And anybody who doesn't want to play with that sort of system of rules, I think, really has got to get on the ball on this. It's just better for everyone. It's proper rules.
Well, it's okay, sure.
Don't harm the hand that heals you. If these are neutrals out on the field, no, you don't throw bombs at them.
And
grenades.
You and I say this as people who read books, people who we've been educated, and we're both in our early 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
early 30s.
Yeah. This kid, he's, young man,
man-child.
He's not that well educated. Even to this day, he's not that well educated. And he was, half our age at the time. And can he be expected to really know and follow all those rules?
Well, shouldn't somebody have told him what you're supposed to throw the grenade at and what you're not supposed to throw the grenade at before they gave him a grenade?
Yes, I think so.
Kind of go over the basics. I mean, the kid knew how to use a gun, right? Someone had to teach him how to do that. Well, you're teaching the person how to use the weapons. You teach them who to shoot at, who not to shoot at. Even if you're the enemy, I kind of hope that's what you're believing in. Don't shoot the neutral healing parties.
Yeah. Well, I wonder about that.
Well, I just think it would work a lot better if the society was able to recognize there's a different set of rules for combat, for morality, but that still includes that there are non-combatants on the field, and you don't just slaughter everyone who's not with you.
Yeah. I have a hard time even getting to that point, because I imagine in every scenario I can imagine, I would be on the American side, and I would consider every American to be if they were uniformed as Americans, at least. I knew they're Americans. I would say those are my friends, and Canadians,
and yet
of course.
They still wind up shooting the occasional Canadian.
Yeah.
This is also, by the way, why I kind of hope if we are going to keep going on with wars in the future, which I hope we phase out, but if we still have to keep on going with wars, we work it more with robots, just to get the adrenaline out. Because a lot of this friendly fire stuff does happen based on adrenaline panic. Something's going on, shoot, fire, throw things at it. No, let's get rid of that and just work with calm, pure, cold, rational logic. We're doing something completely illogical, like shooting people and killing them. I don't know.
How did you make that scary? How did you make calm, pure, cold, rational logic? Now it sounds even more scary than hot-blooded You know.
Hey, who would you rather see coming over the hill? A bunch of Terminators or a bunch of people crazed up, hopped up on, I'm going to have to shoot things. What's going on? Panic.
The panicky people. What was the question again? I think
Who would you rather see?
I'd rather
as a third party, let's say you're a medic out there. Who would you rather see?
Okay,
or,
so
you don't even have to be a medic. You can just be like some townsman where they're going to be fighting.
Oh, well.
Because they always seem to pick a town to fight. And nobody can fight in the middle of nowhere.
I want to see robots. That'd be awesome.
Exactly. There's not just the awesome factor, too. It's because with robots, they can know not to shoot you. No, non-combatant. Next target.
Hi. Are you kidding me? Robots killed the wrong people all the time. In movies.
In movies, yes, where it's portrayed by a bunch of people writing a script.
Okay, well, I can believe that robotic combat could become better and more efficient in the future. Better at killing the right people.
The appropriate targets. Killing the right people just doesn't sound good. Killing acceptable targets, sort of thing.
That's one of the things I put in my... I have a predictions document, and I put it in there that I didn't nail down the date, but I think in about 100 years we'll have a war in which nobody dies. Like, it'll be entirely... there might have been like a technicality.
The officials for some long periods of the Cold War? There's people that got shot, they weren't really working for any side, and they never got admitted to it, but yeah, no one died there. Cold War's rock. Is that where you get like a competition and then the Olympics get even more heightened? It's like, oh no, we have to defeat them. They are our enemy. We must defeat them in the arena of long jump.
I mean, I guess it can't have been pleasant to have the fear of nuclear annihilation over your head every day. On the other hand, we did get the space program.
Listen, okay, let's figure it out this way. The Cold War happened during the 70s, correct? As well as other decades, but it was there during the 70s.
Yeah.
And yet people were still relaxed enough to come up with funk music, afros, and some really wicked designs. I mean, just imagine. I mean, you ever seen Soul Train? Some of those people dancing down there? Those outfits were amazing. Beyond anything you see on the streets today. And they did it during the height of the Cold War. They discoed and they boogie-woogied all night long. So, let's face it, the threat was there, but it wasn't omnipresent. It wasn't like a weekly reminder.
I guess that's true. Yeah. I didn't necessarily grow up in that, so I don't know. I grew up in the later 80s. And
technically, you grew up in the early 80s,
yeah,
too. You just can't remember much about that.
You
know, drooling, learning to walk, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But trust me, I've seen enough stuff. I've seen enough Soul Train. Magnificent style. Magnificent. It was beautiful then. I think today would be a much better place if we all just decided, you know what, let's wear 70s clothing. But with, maybe modern blends and all that sort of thing. Some of that polyester apparently didn't breathe right.
Okay.
So if you can work with a better blend but keep the style and the fashion, oh yeah. As people out there will know, this is about the second time I've brought up the 70s clothing style. First time was with elves.
Oh, I didn't even remember. Okay.
Well, they age 1/7 the speed. Their decade will last 70 years. So 70 years of 70s style.
Okay, so speaking of 70s, it's tomorrow is Halloween.
Oh, yes.
I thought I'd mention that. Today is October the 30th. Oh, and I forgot why I was going to mention it. Anyways, happy Halloween.
This is the start of the 8th episode sort of thing, so we should probably give the date out. We got off on a weird immediate tangent there.
That was our beginning banter that we often do.
Yeah, sorry about that. We usually actually get rid of most of this off-topic stuff before we ever start with the chatting on the microphone. So this is what usually happens before we start talking with you guys.
Oh, I was going to say, though, every day is Halloween with the Simulationist podcast.
What if every day was like Halloween? Because for those out there who listen to stuff like Kevin Smith's Smodcast, I remember him a little ways back bringing up a concept of a nice way to make a weird movie is what if everything is the same as it is now, except one thing has changed, and everyone thinks that's normal. So what if every day was Halloween? It's like you got to get home by a certain time because people are going to come trick or treat.
Oh boy.
Well, there's always hope. We can always, find somebody who's writing fan fiction out there. Oh, speaking of fan fiction, I want to go back to a previous point you mentioned.
Okay.
If you ever do get a chance to talk to Moses back in time, could you try and switch things up so instead of the Israelites leaving Egypt, they wind up settling some sort of truce with Egypt, and so they stay in the area and just merge pantheons together and become like non-slave citizens?
Merge pantheon. So Yahweh becomes just another Egyptian god.
Well, he could be perceived as like the god on high that made things, and then just kind of doesn't do anything. And that's how because that's how a lot of those old religions developed and grew. They just added stuff on. I mean, the Roman pantheon itself is basically just that.
Yeah, well, that's what
invade an
I'm
area,
saying.
take some people, and then we'll take your god too. Oh, what? He's got horns, goat legs. We'll call him Pan. He's wonderful. We love him. He does all sorts of fun dances. Woo! Let's go into the next area.
I'll bring my modern ethics and sensibility back to Moses and say, can't we all just get along?
Forge a union. By the people, for the people, and using a nice mixture of Egyptian hieroglyphics and the old Hebrew script.
Wasn't the Freemasons, weren't they supposed to, I mean, not really, but the mythology is that they were founded a guild is a kind of union. So they were basically a union, the
original union, apparently, as things go. There were groups of people before, like people that made shoes or people that did this and that, but no one was as important a union as the people that built the big structures. So yes, they were the union.
Yeah. So that would be like fulfilling history, just in a different way.
Kind of. I kind of like my concept of the Israelites staying in Egypt and then forming a nice, wonderful dynasty of like a new Hebrew-Egyptian dynasty together. I think there could be some awesomeness to be had there. So if you or anyone out there listening gets a chance to go back in time and talk to Moses, pitch the idea to him.
This is assuming you can't do the whole kill Hitler thing. You have to go back. Okay.
Well, see, that's the thing, though, because if you have them, the Israelites and the Egyptians going together, you won't wind up with the same set of circumstances that leads up to Hitler. So by doing that, by merging the two forces together into a one unified area, forget Israel as its own promised land. The whole area along the river, along Egypt, there becomes the promised land. You drastically change history and preempt Hitler from ever existing or rising to power.
Wow, I think you might be right about that. You might have just won that.
I think I did. But I do like that you did bring up quickly, though, the Masons, because that brings us to conspiracy theories. And that's where I want to actually bring in something.
Okay, nice segue there.
Well, it's not a tight segue. It's a bit of a sloppy one because I went back to preempting Hitler. But, yes, okay. So, last week, it'll be the week before last, we talked about, the man's name was John Disney, but I don't like using the word Disney on anything where we can potentially be sued. So we're going to keep calling him Planktos, the eco-maverick.
Oh, yeah, Planktos.
Yes, how he dumped 100 tons of iron-rich nutrients into the ocean. For those of you who do have the date and know that we are on the West Coast, you may realize that within the last week there have been two earthquakes, 7.7 and a 6.2 magnitude on the Richter scale, in addition to several pre-tremors, after-tremors that have happened, some of which of sizable amounts as well.
Yep.
But let's bring this along a conspiracy theory. Those out there who are well-read enough to have gotten a copy of Steve Jackson's Illuminati book for the GURPS setting.
Which doesn't include me, but don't go on.
They will have read that in such an illuminated setting, there are no coincidences. Everything is meant to happen as it happens because the people who control how things happen make sure that's how it's happening. And I like this. It's interesting to think paranoid thoughts, to think conspiracy thoughts. Don't believe them, but think them, because it's a nice way to open yourself up to new ways of thinking, to just imagining things in different ways. I think it's good if you want to design a game, if you want to design a campaign, if you just want to take and hook two otherwise unrelated campaigns together. It's a very good mental tool.
Paranoia.
Yeah, paranoia as a building concept.
Well, I've never heard it described that way until you did that just now. And
trust me, I spent some time at some of my jobs just thinking conspiracy theory thoughts all day. When the opportunity allowed, and it was good thinking. Don't believe the thoughts, but think the thoughts. Find ways to connect them. It's like finding a way to make everything reduce to somehow be related to the number 5. It's an interesting way. If you think hard enough, far enough, everything will eventually work its way out to 5. Not because it actually does, it's because you're playing mental gymnastics. Same way with conspiracy theories on anything. So, let's assume for a minute that we are in an illuminated style fantasy setting.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is fantasy in the fact that, there actually is an organization out there running everything and can do this sort of stuff. So how, Josh, would you connect Planktos, the eco-maverick, and his 100-ton dumping and a massive planktonic bloom to the large earthquakes that have happened in the same area a week later? Or, well, I guess several months later.
Okay, so I have to think paranoid. I'm not allowed to think rationally.
These two events are connected. Not so that you see it from the surface, so to speak, which is actually kind of good, nice play on words, as this deals with water and underwater stuff. They're not connected on the surface, but they are connected somehow. These two events are not isolated or mutually exclusive. How did this happen? How did the planktonic bloom, how did the 100-ton dumping of iron-rich nutrients lead to these earthquakes?
Okay, I have 2 boring answers right away. They are paranoid, so that counts for their favorites. The first boring answer is that, science did it. Okay, so this is the iron reacting with something in the ocean and causing a chain reaction, all chemical, all
Well, magnetochemical.
Sure.
There's iron in there.
Okay,
I
didn't think of the magnet article. That does add the interesting meter another notch.
And, magnets are mysterious to many people, so you could get away with explaining stuff a little more loosely, saying magnetochemical.
That's true, yes. And so magnets, but I guess, one of my boring things was, no magnets, just kind of chemical chain reaction. It floats down to some crevice in the earth, and then it reacts with something down there, and it explodes, and then that forces open a little fissure, and water gets in there, and hits some lava, and that steam expands.
Keep in mind, this is a slip strike fault, so they go back and forth. It's not subduction where one goes over top of the other. So if you do know about that sort of thing, it could help explain stuff out.
Okay.
And it does explain why it took about 45 minutes before they issued any sort of tsunami warning, because due to the slip strike fault, there aren't tsunamis from that sort of thing. Ooh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it turns out they had one wave somewhere that was 40 centimeters higher than usual. One wave.
Yeah, I
Definitely not like the East Coast with their 4 meters or so rise in some areas because of the hurricane.
Right, okay.
The
so
Frankenstorm.
My other boring answer, why am I showing my boring answer? Because they're the first ones that came to my head, is that there is an earth spirit that got angry.
Oh, okay. Now here's an interesting one. I'm going to work things on the other way. We've been working Planktos the Eco-Maverick as a sort of semi or fully villainous kind of character. Now I'm going to say, what if he did this because he's the hero of this story?
Okay, yeah, I like it.
What if there is a down deep on the ocean bottom up here, some Cthulian type entity that he released the iron-rich contents not to cause the bloom, but as like a material component for a spell cast on just a truly massive and epic scale to deny things from happening in the proper sequence, such that instead of this Cthulian entity rising and wreaking havoc upon all of mortal lands, instead it rumbles and stirs in its sleep, turns over, causing a few earthquakes. Da-da-da-dun.
Yep.
He's painted as the villain through all the known world, but nobody really knows he saved all our lives.
I wonder if he would, if we like called him up or something like that. I don't know if he's doing interviews.
He probably isn't, but given the nature of what we're doing here, if he would not try to entertain the concept of it for fun.
I don't know. I wonder what that guy is up to. Like, do you think he went into hiding or do you think he's? I
think he's hiding from a few potential lawsuits, but not hiding as in I'm in a cave somewhere you can't find me. Well, it's just I'm not answering the phone or doorbell unless I know exactly who's there.
Where did Julian Assange end up? He never got to Ecuador, did he?
He's on the Ecuadorian ambassador.
He's still in the embassy?
Yes, and they still have like a troop of policemen out there just waiting in case he steps out so they can jump him.
I think Planktos should join Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy.
Well, for that, he has to make friends with the Ecuadorian officials. And that means he has to get on their good side and have something they potentially want.
Oh, but didn't he try it in the Galapagos?
Yes, and he got refused, I believe, at gunpoint at some bits to get the heck out of here.
Yeah, although that would have been Chile?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but not Ecuador. But
so he can't take refuge in any Chilean embassies.
Are Ecuador and Chile like enemies of each other? They must be like a little. Well,
I think there's maybe a little rivalry going on, but it's a good-natured rivalry where you want to kick the other team's ass at soccer.
Yeah, but you wouldn't necessarily hold a fugitive from them and not hand them over.
Maybe a little bit if you really wanted something right now and use it as like because it's this week and we have the opportunity, I'm going to withhold until you sign this trade agreement. Okay, now we can get bananas slightly cheaper. Take them.
You can have Plankton and Julian Assange in the deal.
No, Julian Assange seems to be very well positioned for aggravating Americans, which apparently the Ecuadorians really get a kick out of doing, so he's going to stick around for a bit.
Yep. Well, and yeah, that part about me, like, all Americans are my friends, that doesn't mean I don't want to annoy them.
Not personally. Let's face it, the 1 to 2% baseline jerk, ratio out there means no, you don't. And let's see, there's 330 million Americans? That's 3 to 6 million jerks out there just by mathematical default. Wow.
Do you think America has a higher per capita number? They probably do have more jerks per capita than any other country.
I think it might rise up in some areas. I've been told that New York City is very cold in personality. They're very much more of a cutthroat sort of thing, so it might rise up there. But it depends. Is that people acting out like they should be that sort of way, or people acting out as in, everyone else is being this way, I have to be too, otherwise I'll get trampled on.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought of the New York that attitude as being something kind of positive, like survival. Not survivalist, because that brings to mind the mountain man living in West Virginia.
The urban survivalist.
That's different. I guess some kind of urban survivalist, yeah. But they have a sort of decency that I guess they don't talk about it too much. But there's
really, I've been told they will push you over just to take a cab seat from you.
Yeah, but they won't. Well, let me see.
I've been told they're very professional in conduct, but still cold.
Okay.
Now, mind you, I've never been down there. I do know some people who are there, and very much do not fit with that. But that is just what I've heard from many stories out here as to how things are. When they order their coffee, they want it now. And God help the barista who's behind on serving stuff.
Well, I'm gonna have to go to New York and see what it's like.
Well, wait till the floodwaters recede and everybody's fixed everything up.
Yeah, it'd be funny if New York because remember New Orleans when it got hit by a hurricane, it kind of never recovered.
Well, it's still recovering. Keep in mind there was a lot more deaths going on there. Now they still haven't found all the deaths from a place, something that's still receding now with the hurricane, but it was much more traumatic. They felt much more isolated. In this case, Barack Obama was actually up there. He was up at the start of the morning. He was saying, "We've got people doing this. I'm making sure on this. If you are having problems, contact me immediately. Contact him. Contact him officially. Phone the White House. They'll try and help you." That is so much better than what George W. Bush was doing.
I agree. It's easy to make a contrast between Obama's reaction to a hurricane and Bush's reaction. I will throw in this point, though, that the hurricane which happened in the Northeast there's more population there, there's more infrastructure, and the president also lives in that area. Or now that he's president, anyways, he's from
Chicago. So technically, it is one of the areas in the umbrella of Sandy.
I think Chicago is getting heavy rain.
Trust me, everything on that entire side. The Sandy is huge. It's everywhere. It's hitting it's hitting just the maritime provinces too. It's massive. But I think it just had more to do with the feeling of being abandoned.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So there were people there rescuing. There are people doing the rescues now. And don't forget, though, Hurricane Katrina was just horrible. It was like people described it as hell on earth, and there's really not a lot to counter that argument. It was a horrible event for the people there. So,
wow,
maybe New York's getting off much lighter in this sort of case.
I suppose, and I don't know what the difference in population is between those two areas, but I think, there's a lot more people in that northeastern region
along the seaboard.
Yeah.
There's just heck, that's where everyone started coming from when they started migrating.
When they migrated over from Europe, through Ellis Island.
It's like up here in Canada and going along the old line of the railroad. There's a reason that's why 70% of the national Canadian population lives very close to that sort of area. It's just where the path was.
I always thought that it was because, basically Canadians originated as British loyalists who couldn't stand the cold. So they went as far south as they possibly could without being in America.
No, actually, I'm going to spoil things for you. We put the railroad so far south to prevent America from claiming the land any far north of where we put it.
Okay. Well, I don't like that either, because that means America was so strong that we had to, the only thing that could stop.
Think of it as being really wily. We cut them off at the pass by building our railroads to the south, and that guarantees us, no, this is us here with a huge population. There's no way you can claim this land as being anything but Canadian.
Yeah, but then why didn't we build it all the way down to California?
There was enough of an American presence down there, and there was some actual obligations to show up at certain points, the Calgary area, make things over the Rockies, and then you can't make things anywhere over the Rockies. Were so hard to get trains through. It took so long that basically was just, we'll just cut it across straight and that'll be good. If we had, in a southwestern way, that'll be just building into theirs. There's enough of a population who wants to be called Americans there. We might not win it. This is where we can win.
I remember reading, though, that Vancouver Island, when it was its own colony, and British Columbia as a colony, there was discussion in 1867, before British Columbia joined Canada. There was
the whole Oregon area?
Significant. Well, I guess that too. There was discussion of maybe we should just be a state. Maybe we should just do that.
Well, yeah, but I mean that's okay. Well, get this. Over in where I grew up in the eastern, far eastern part of the province, and we have people every once in a while saying, "Well, why don't we leave BC and become part of Alberta? Because we're much closer and easier accessible to the Albertans than we are to the rest of British Columbia."
Okay.
But, okay, I'll spoil it for you. They're kind of whack jobs. No one really listens to them, but they still find their way onto the news somehow. But it's on your own self-interest. It's like what we were talking about before, enlightened self-interest.
Okay.
It's about what's best for you. And they were thinking, well, you know what? They have some stuff going on down in the Seattle, San Francisco area. These things are all going very nice American. We can get them to ship stuff up. Maybe it'll be easier for us if we just claim to be Americans. And so in the end we decided, we'll split the Oregon area. And the people in the farther south are Americans. The people up top are Canadians. And hey, that's how it goes.
Yeah. What was it? They had a war or an incident in the San Juan Islands.
Yes.
Well, readers or listeners, you're going to have to just go do your own research. But it was like one casualty. It was like a pig.
Yeah. Yeah, that poor pig. They still haven't put up a monument to him, I believe. Or her. What? Did they know the gender of the pig? They should put that up on one of the islands.
I want to say it was a female pig, but
okay. That poor pig. No one's put up a monument to her. So, I think those sort of things, because that was a fight, a skirmish, where the only person that died was a pig. And I think that's the war you were wanting in the future that happened in the past.
Yeah, and I was thinking that it might be. I might have to just.
Wasn't that a great war where the only person that died was the one pig? I mean, dude, we lost a pig, but that's the only one. That was pretty good.
Pretty good.
We should use this as a model for future fights.
There have been other things that people called wars that didn't actually involve violence. I can't think of any right now, but anyways.
More of the Cold War style.
I suppose, yeah.
So let's get back onto the topic at hand. Is there any other way we can connect the earthquake to the planktonic bloom and dumping of the 100 plus tons of rich nutrients?
Well, I
just think conspiracy theory. How are these connected?
Okay, conspiracy theory.
Yes.
Well, that iron had to come from somewhere. Maybe it unbalanced the other side of the Earth.
That's not bad. Let's see, what else can we do? We've covered the whole mystical angle.
What about a UFO? Maybe it's
oh, there we go.
the concentration of iron sent a
messed
signal.
Up their signals, and then the alien had to move, and when they moved, because they moved their underwater base, it caused the earthquake. They just didn't give a darn. They had to move out of the poisonous iron radiative effects.
I love how they moved their underground base, which just happened to be in a slip zone for earthquake zone, where earthquakes are expected to happen.
Well, it might not necessarily be close by. Maybe that's why they put the base there, knowing that if there was an earthquake, as they moved their base to another location, people will just say, oh, slip strike fault. That's all that's happened.
Oh, if I ever build an underground alien base, it's going to be on a fault
somewhere
line.
With decent plausible deniability.
That sounds perfect. A nice fault line where earthquakes are common.
But I mean, they're aliens in their alien underwater base. They're not,
sure.
Unless like a 12-pointer happens, they're completely fine. They'll just move, elsewhere. So yes, we have our USOs, as they're technically called when they're interacting with the water, submerged objects.
Oh, so cool.
So yes, in that case, once again, this Planktos guy was actually trying to keep alien investigative watching effects away from us. Again, Planktos, the eco-maverick, was the hero in eliminating, or at least temporarily delaying, the alien observation threat of the west coast of Canada.
So what's the government angle on this? Because we can't trust the U.S. government if we're going to be paranoid.
We can't trust the Canadian
or the
government.
Canadian government,
especially if you read comics. If you read comics, the Canadian government is the worst thing in existence.
Okay, I missed that comic book.
All the comic books. Have you ever seen any of the stuff that happens in Marvel Comics about Canada? We're a horrible nation, according to them. We've got Department H, where it's tossing all sorts of weird stuff into people, into animals, mixing genes up, and then occasionally we accidentally open up a realm to another, thing where a great giant beast comes out, ravages the land, destroys things, and then we have to put him back within 20 minutes, or otherwise he'll destroy everything. Canada's a horrible place in the comics. You cannot trust the Canadian government, especially in a conspiracy theory or a comic book sense. So yes, what did the Canadian government have to do with this?
Okay, so they must have paid Planktos to do the thing that he did. or like, basically they must be behind him. And then maybe they had to betray him and say they didn't know anything about him.
They cut him loose, set him out to the dogs, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but they have to be implicated in the whole, like the actual act, because like true paranoia is like the government knows and they don't want you to know.
Okay, how about this? Here's a theory. I'll switch things for you. The Canadian government is the bad guys, and they're trying to stop what Planktos was doing. He said he could potentially use this amount of feed to create record-returning salmon runs. In cases where there are record-returning salmon runs, the price of salmon goes down, which means the nursery salmon price also goes down, even though it's of a lesser quality, sort of thing. There's no demand for it because everyone's got all this cheap salmon. It's just coming up out of the river that you just grab in a net. So they want to make sure there is not enough fish to have any more record runs. Not good for their business. They want the natural stuff to eventually become extinct, so they have only the farm stuff. So that
farm fish, farm salmon. That's a good Canadian topic.
So that yes, they wind up having the sole market sort of thing. There's no wild salmon anymore. It's just these guys, and then you don't have to worry about like problems with lice infecting the wild population, sea lice and all that. Look it up; it's disgusting. And they effectively have the market cornered because there's no natural competition. So they use their Canadian-based earthquake machine, or I don't know, maybe pay the American government to use their American, earthquake machine to cause an earthquake down there that will, through convoluted means that they know of how the salmon operate when they're off the coast, that is not public knowledge, will prevent this abundance of planktonic bloom from ever resulting in a record salmon run harvest. So and that's how they're connected. It was a counter maneuver. So John Disney tries to enrich it to get the runs to go up. They counter him by saying, "No, you are interfering with our money-making schemes," and so earthquake.
Well, yeah,
there we go.
Like that.
But yes, I think it's at least a good mental practice for everybody to try and come up with as many different ways to connect two unrelated events as possible. So it's a good thing to do, especially when you're a little bored.
Okay.
Why is this website not going up here today? And then you find something else goes on, like why is it a red light every day? All of a sudden it starts working into a conspiracy theory about trying to make you jaded and bitter. The website you wanted to read isn't up today. You can't read anything. It's a red light for every light on the way to work. It's just another way to sap you of your willpower through passive means.
That's right.
Don't
Go
actually
crazy.
believe it, but it's fun to do that, just to come up with these ideas, and then if you really want to make sure you're sane, find ways to deconstruct and prove that this is not happening. Because that way, if you do start going insane from thinking these thoughts, you can at least work your way back, which is possibly for the best. So yes, everyone out there, keep thinking different fictional ways to connect unrelated events.
Unrelated. Okay.
So yes. Well, we can bring this up to other topics in the future. Just different ways to connect random events.
I would enjoy that as a little feature. Sure.
Okay, there we go. In that case, you can look to us for decent little bits of the news in the future, but not in the best possible way. Entertaining, but not necessarily informative.
Okay, watch this segue. Speaking of things that are unrelated, this next segment is unrelated to the previous segment.
Or is it? Now, for those people out there who are watching, this unrelated segment is a perfect way for you to figure out how we're trying to influence your minds by putting a logical progression. We say they're unrelated, but you can subconsciously pick it up, and that's influencing your thought patterns. So my question is, range versus focus within gaming fiction. Is one better than the other? And in which situations do they excel? For instance, the whole Palladium style, especially with riffs, GURPS, as we mentioned earlier tonight, and we can even put 3.0, 3.5, Dungeons and Dragons includes almost everything. You want to play samurai, you want to play scions, you want to play mages, you want to play fighters, you want to do all sorts of different things. There's something to get you covered for it. It's everything in the kitchen sink style. Whereas something like White Wolf, their various games allow you to play only one of a certain type of creature. It's a one monster game. You can all be vampires, you can all be werewolves, but they have tried in the past to make certain that the rule systems don't properly convert over, so you can't have one person being a werewolf, one person being a vampire, one person being a wraith, and another person being we'll go with a mummy, because that was one of their more obscure fun settings, apparently. But, you know, they work it so that you're all the one type. If you want to play a vampire game, you're all vampires. It has a very good focus on their theme.
So, was the question which one is better, or
not necessarily? We can go work with which one we prefer. I think better is that's the only way you can describe it is on personal better. But there is always a situation whereby one works better for the story you're trying to tell over the other.
Okay, so for the DM to tell, or for the campaign setting creators?
Ostensibly the DM, but as with any work of collaborative fiction, it's the DM and the gamers all working together. Which which works. When does it work best to have focus? When does it work best to have range? So, what's your preference for style?
Well, I don't think I've really experienced the extreme end of range of like a campaign where with the cowboy and the cat lady and the robot in the same party.
And a superhero.
And a superhero, right. Just that kind of wide, like, everything's in there.
Multi-genre platformer.
I have experienced D&D quite a bit, which I don't think is necessarily that kind of, like, mishmash. But
it certainly is allowable for it. You can have one person playing a ghost, one person playing a samurai, one person playing halfling cannibal barbarian, another person being a knight of Solamnia, and it can all technically work out.
Well, yeah, it can. It gets a little bit weird, and it's not likely to happen because what the reality is, each of those requires like its own, like, you would find the samurai in a different book. You would find
Oriental Adventures, Ghost Walk, Dark Sun, and Dragonlance, I think, were the examples we were effectively spouting.
Like, in our groups, like, we seem to be collectors. We seem to all get a lot of the books, and so we do have access. But, well, maybe that is the case. But I think the typical, or maybe not our example of a group, would be to have one or two extra books and not necessarily be able to achieve that kind of range because it's just expensive to have all those sources.
But I recall one of your previous campaigns. It was called Verdilvia, if I'm not mistaken. It was a very green setting, very natural, very very heavy in the wood sort of style.
Yeah, that was supposed to be. Yeah.
Yes, it was very nice. I wound up playing an elven chronomancer.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
Yes, and I quite liked that. I think it actually wound up bringing in some nice backstory elements, because you were bringing in some stuff like what had happened previously on the Verdilvian demi-plane. And I was able to help provide the expository information by, oh, that's right, I was there on the first sunrise on this plane.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
That was cool. I liked that.
I don't think I fully took advantage of that at the time. Oh, well, maybe I did, like, as much as I could during the course of the campaign.
Well, you were running two different unrelated groups.
Yeah, there's different groups and different players with different interests. But I kind of wish now that I had done more, had explored that more. So that we can
at least toss out the idea that range has much more playing style abilities that you can work in these backstory things where, despite the fact that everyone's wandering around in the wilderness, a chronomancer still finds a way for it to be home, finds their purpose within the setting.
Well, that's cool. That's partly the nature of the chronomancer. I mean, you look at a character like Doctor Who, and it's like, wherever he is, there he is. Wherever you are, there you are. Is that how that goes?
Wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah, wherever you go, there you are. So kind of you're at the center no matter what surroundings, like new surroundings you
I
get.
always find most of the time Doctor Who's stuff that his time travel, his time space ability manipulation was always just a means to get to the story.
Yeah.
It was never originally the story in and of itself. I believe it did very originally before the reboot. First season it was supposed to be like a historical educational thing. They go to ancient Rome and learn about ancient Roman things. And then they have one where it's in the future and things are going on. And man, the ratings are through the roof. Look at that. Everyone loves this episode. Let's keep focusing in that direction. Which maybe is another thing that we can say is a benefit to range. It allows you to try out many things, and wherever the game seems to be going, you can just progress it that way.
Yeah.
As opposed to focus where, everyone's a vampire. But if everyone's focusing on something where being a vampire isn't really necessary, you're kind of hampered in that case by all being vampires.
Well, but the problem with range, and this doesn't have to be a problem, but it's kind of a thing that comes up from time to time, is like because weird storylines happen that don't necessarily go anywhere. It's like because remember that time when we all went to that place and we all became like rock stars, and then that for some reason now we're not anymore.
Bad television writing styles. I understand that.
But I guess you can ignore that. I mean, why do you have to focus on that? If you're doing the role playing thing, your ongoing story, you don't necessarily have to worry about the thing that you did last week that kind of would break it.
So in that case, the episodic style works out well too, where everything returns to the status quo at the end.
Well, but you were saying with like Doctor Who, it's like, oh, now we do future stuff. Well, so we have a new status quo, and we are progressing, but we do these side tangents that don't go anywhere, and some do and some don't. That's kind of the idea with range, is that you go all these different paths.
Not everything wound up being as good as the Daleks or the Cybermen.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's just a one-off villain of the week, turning people into mulch or something, and the Doctor solves that, and then they leave. So yeah, I guess like my natural inclination is towards the focused campaign, but I can see the value in having a little bit of range, a little bit of weirdness. I do think focus does tend to help for telling a story. If you have a particular story you want to tell, you can say, this is where we're going to focus, and then hopefully the players are working with you, and then they can work towards that as well. So if you say, I want to tell a story about, the mafia, is in 1920s New York, hopefully you're not going to have cowboys or superheroes in there.
Yeah, well, I imagine a cowboy could, because from the era, it would be...
They'd be like a 60-year-old cowboy. They're living the high life back when they were in their 20s in the 1880s.
The 1880s. There were still cowboys. Like, even today, there are people who ride horses and herd cows, right?
They're not the Wild West cowboy the stereotype tends to
They're
picture.
not the gunslingers and all that.
They're not the riflemen, for those who follow that old series.
Do you think cowboys still carried guns in the 20s and 30s?
Oh, yeah. Heck, if they carried them in the 1880s, they'll carry them later.
I guess the difference between 20s and 30s, it would be after the war, the First World War. So that would have quite an effect. Of course, the whole cowboy era happened after the Civil War, and the mobster era happened after the First World War. There can't possibly be a connection there, could there?
Well, of course there can. But we won't discuss that at this point in time. That's up for the listeners to start forming their own strands of information and weave their own conspiracy theories.
And then what happened after the Second World War?
Well, CB, the 40s, then you went to the weird 50s.
Beat generation?
Yeah, you had the weird, you had that 50s sort of stuff, starting off like you get the Mad Men sort of thing, and then you went deep into hippie and psychedelic 70s.
Psychedelic 70s.
Yes, and then you went into the whole me-decade 80s and all that sort of thing.
I think psychedelic 70s might have been post-Vietnam,
Yeah, there was a Vietnam connection in on that.
Yeah, so wars happened, and then dudes come back from the war and they're crazy and they do crazy things, which are really cool too, and they tell crazy cool stories.
And drugs. Oh man, drugs. Okay, in their own words, maybe more of a self-medication.
I remember hearing about how the demographics of America changed. This is from another podcast, which if you're a podcast listener, I was listening to Penn Jillette interview George Takei, and they were talking about how the GIs in World War II brought back Japanese wives. In other wars, often they'll bring back wives. So I'm wondering, when the Afghanistan war finally winds down, we bring everyone back. Like, I haven't heard of dudes bringing back Afghan wives, but I imagine...
Or husbands, because there are the females overseas.
Yeah.
Before, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah, so that can happen certainly now. I imagine that must be occurring, like, as we speak.
Well, my wife is from the Philippines, and I have heard a decent amount of stuff, because they had some American Air Force bases over there for a while.
Yeah.
After the World War II, and that was a thing where they'd wind up meeting a girl, falling in love, returning back with the Pinoy housewife sort of thing. But that does mean you have to have that interaction, and I'm not sure if that sort of interaction is happening in Afghan, Iraq sort of thing. They tend to be sequestering the troops away because of threats of like suicide bombers.
I guess that
you didn't have as much of a threat of a suicide bomber, I believe, in Vietnam. You did have to worry about like those caves that they were digging out underneath everybody. That was something to be worried about, but you didn't have to worry about somebody walking up, opening up a vest full of dynamite and then blowing up. I hadn't. Oh, okay, maybe. I can't recall ever hearing about that though.
Well, I obviously wasn't alive during the era, so and I'm not a big war buff. So
we can switch this over to the Korean conflict. It didn't happen too far off time-wise.
Okay, we're to Korea.
You'd think they would have mentioned something like that in MASH if that was a thing that happened then.
Well, like suicide.
Because the Korean conflict only lasted 2 years before they had their stalemate, and that lasts until now, and who knows how long into the future. But yeah, MASH went on for 11 seasons? Do you think they would have done something like that for at least one of the episodes? And I cannot recall anything like that being ever mentioned.
Well, I'm sure there were suicidal. There were characters. There were
suicide missions, but I don't think they did the suicide bombing as a tactic then.
Yeah, I don't remember that specific tactic.
I don't recall anything in Good Morning Vietnam. And that covered a decent amount too, for being a bit with some nice comedy in it, but otherwise very serious.
Well, okay, so let's bring this down. Let's make this more concrete, because we want to talk about. We're talking about a situation in which, an American GI or Canadian or
we'll say foreign GI, goes into the land,
is going into an Asian country during a war, what is the situation that he goes to meet someone?
Okay, well in that case they tended to have a home side. South Korea, the people working with that, so that when they were done at the end of the day, they could go to a bar, they could go see some sights. Maybe not all the time. As you can recall from something like MASH, getting a chance to go to Japan for a weekend was, that's the pinnacle of what you want to do. You want to get out of here. Live up in Japan, eat some real food, meet some real people that are bleeding everywhere, and just, soak in the culture. That was a reoccurring thing throughout all the seasons. Whereas I don't recall there being that sort of same sort of thing in Iraq or Afghanistan. They seem to just be, sequestering themselves in the forts unless they need to go out doing patrols and all that.
I have heard that about. I just wonder if that's necessarily true, and is that even possible to do with an operation as big as a war?
Well, it's not, of course, something you can do, but they do try, and it seems to be that they're limiting the access points because of these threats.
Huh.
So it may wind up being that you're not going... It will happen, of course. At least one case, it will happen. Guy or gal comes back with a spouse from there.
Yep.
Love in a dangerous time. To quote the Bare Naked Ladies. Yes, that's right. I quoted the Bare Naked Ladies.
Sorry, I know a lot of Bare Naked Lady songs, but I guess
Lovers in a Dangerous Time?
I may not have heard that one.
Really? Dude, go search that one up. That's one of their big ones. It's the one they keep getting a good play on.
Okay, I will.
Gotta kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight? That's not a quote lyric you're getting? Wow, man. It's a good one. It's a good one. Trust me, you'll like it. It's a pretty good music video, too, if I recall.
Okay.
I suggest everybody go out and look it up. They're a good band. They're good to hear. Very nice and easy on the ear. But, yes, because they're not having such a depth or repeated interaction, I don't think it's going to be as prevalent as the historical cases of with Vietnam and the other nations.
I wonder, too, like, this war, like, the Afghanistan war, is a very
conflict, as they call it.
It's a very long thing that's happened for a long time. And I wonder, do we have a more, like, is our military, we'll talk about Canada, and there probably are statistics out there, so I don't know why I'm talking about this. But do you think our military is getting, like, older on average?
Oh, a little bit older, because I recall, at least for, what was it, that one song, 19, they're singing about the horrors of the Vietnam conflict, on how, like, in World War II, the average age was 21, but in Vietnam, the average age of the person there was, like, 19. And that was, like, much more traumatizing, a couple years difference from mental maturity. Because the human brain doesn't actually hit full maturity until about 23. So, like, you and I got our degrees before our brains were fully mature, which is a little weird to think about. But, oh well. So, in that case, a more mature army thing might not necessarily be a bad thing.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, too. But and the other thing, though, is that if they're more mature, they probably already have relationships.
I would like to see, what the ratio is of married people going into the conflicts throughout the various conflicts. I think you could get some really good sociological stuff in there, and it makes me kind of sad I went to the hard sciences, because there's a lot of really nice stuff you can learn digging around in sociology.
Social science, that'd be cool. Just gathering data,
gathering and interpreting the data. If you can interpret it the right way, oh boy, you got tenure somewhere. Just for instance, pick the fast food industry. Sometimes they get no people in for hours. Sometimes everyone comes in at once. Not necessarily associated with the same reasons, but if you can figure out why these people are coming at these times or the odd times, as opposed to, during the standard, this is a meal time, then you could start breaking that up and have them coming all throughout the day. You avoid the rush. Everybody gets fast service. You could make a freaking mint. You could have all the fast food restaurants just head over heels for you if you could analyze and interpret that information. Wow. Like they say, the soft sciences like sociology are never going to accomplish the same things that the hard physics, and biochemistry can do, but they can change the world when you can understand them enough. So don't sell them short.
Well, I want to see them succeed at that. I think like a task like you were saying, like predicting
customer
people,
patterns.
There are advances you can make, but in some cases, it's kind of chaos theory. It's just it gets too complicated to model. It's because it might just be the way the roads are laid out in that town. Like
they say, too complicated to model. I always take that as being too lazy to try.
Well, in my case, yes, because I haven't got my degree in science. Or
well, it's just like the uncertainty principle. Is that you can either determine where something's going or how fast it's going, but not both. But that's because you're using these relatively huge particles to bombard it to figure out where it is.
Yeah.
You need to find something much more relatively smaller so you're not changing it. It's like trying to determine where a van is going down the road by use of a cannon. Of course, when you hit a bounce off, you can figure out, oh, it's there. Of course, you've changed the trajectory. You hit it with the side of a cannon.
Yeah.
And that's basically what's going on there.
Or like trying to determine how fast a cannonball is rolling down the road by throwing a van at it.
Yes, something similar to that. They're very proportionally the same size. Saying it's too complicated to model just means you need much more fine-tuned instruments to help you model out.
Which might not be physically possible.
Not possible now. There's always the possibility in the future.
Well, I like the way you think there. I like your optimism.
Well, I recall back in 1904, a very learned man saying, "We've basically discovered everything that can be discovered. There's no point in pursuing it any further." And he was like the head of a scientific group of that was well esteemed in its day. It's completely defunct now because of people like him thinking they had discovered everything. But as we know now, 1904 is not the end for discoveries. So just because you can't see it doesn't mean there's not a chance or some way to do it out there.
Well, okay.
Yeah, so there you go. Just think about that. Is just because you can't see the fact that there might be more out there, don't assume that there isn't. It's a good positive thinking, too.
Yes, don't assume that...
Just because you can't see it, it's not out there.
Be open-minded.
Of course, that brings us back to Sasquatch. We can't see it out there. Does it exist?
Well, if there's no evidence...
Yeah, there you go. At this time, there's not enough evidence to support such a theory. I'm afraid I'll have to reject it based on this.
I love that attitude that says, we're always open to that it might, it's so ridiculous. Like if you took something like fairies or something like something completely impossible, and you still if you have that skeptical attitude, you still say, but maybe they are, and maybe we just don't have enough data. So
probably don't, but we don't know everything in the universe, so maybe. But here's the thing: have I ever told you about how that connects up with my previous theory, how I used with Sasquatch and the Green Man?
Okay.
So the fairies become gray aliens.
Oh, okay.
Visitors from another world that take you, occasionally have children, hybrid children with you, and return you without any physical evidence of your abduction. Did I just talk about fairies or aliens?
Oh yeah, okay.
So they are the equivalency for the Green Man and Sasquatch. Back in 500 years ago, people were abducted by fairies who took them away to their weird land, and then, oh hey, yes, I had fairy children, and before they returned me, and nowadays it's no, while I was asleep, gray aliens came down, abducted me, stole my genetic material and made a hybrid child, and then they returned me. No, I have no evidence. Why do you ask?
So in 1,000 years, once we get over this whole alien thing, what are we going to turn to? What's the next frontier from which alien beasts, the alien
other, the concept of the other can come and take us.
Yeah, so what's next in 1,000 years from now? Say we're living on asteroids.
Positive. 500 years from now, when we can figure out that, no, there aren't actually any gray aliens. We've asked the other species out there. No one's seen or heard of a gray alien. Yeah.
500 years from now, we're living on asteroids. SETI has detected a signal, and we've actually been able to respond, so we have a conversation going with an alien species.
No, man. Gray, big, black eye. No, never heard of anything like that. No, we got things, scales, big smiles, teeth. Oh, lizard people. Yes, you know them as lizard people. Yeah, we got them everywhere. Place is lousy with them. But gray things? No. Why? Are you getting that? Okay, we'll put an APB out for them, but I don't know, man.
So, as antiquated now as fairies seem to us,
the gray alien will one day seem to our descendants.
To our descendants.
Knock on wood, we all have descendants for 500 years from now. I'm insured for the next generation, but
for another generation.
I don't know about 500 years is a long time to maintain a lineage for any one group of people. You never know how it works out. But yes, okay. So there's always another area sort of thing. It might not be gray aliens. It might be creatures from a different quantum strata.
Oh man, that would be awesome. Quantum,
yes. They're shifting across the quantum veil. They're coming to take us to their own reality. And that's where they're coming from and abducting us to and then returning us with no evidence. And that's how they can be anywhere. They exist on another plane of reality, and so they just figure out where the right area is to interact with us, and then they take us in our sleep.
But what color are they?
Let's see. Well, fairies were very colorful. They were known for being like almost garishly colorful in some senses.
A lot of green.
Aliens go gray. So let's invent a new color. They're colors
Gamma.
They're colors that don't exist within this reality.
The color gamma.
Fulligin.
Okay.
That is the actual word to describe a color that is blacker than black.
Okay. Is that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
No, it's one of those weird books. They describe it as a fuliginous cloak, and to describe that as blacker than black can be. So yes, fuligin and octoroon, which is the color of magic. But yes, there we go. They are colors that mankind cannot envision because it is not possible within this limited reality we call our home dimension.
Well, I like... I think they should be part of the microwave background radiation, because, microwaves and gamma rays and all that are technically electromagnetic radiation.
So they're infrared.
So, well, they're beyond infrared. They're because, the very most distant objects in the universe are in the microwave because it's redshifted that far, right? So the aliens would be only visible in microwave.
Oh, weird.
So you stick them in your microwave and turn it on and
they show up. Oh, that would be weird because then because they're on like a different quantum reality than us, and you can only see them on like through microwave radiation. It'd be like you turn on the microwave and all of a sudden there's a face in there, an inhuman face in the microwave. Creepy.
Okay,
nice.
This is getting really weird, and we've gone over 90 minutes. I think we might just
very
call it a
tangential,
podcast.
but I think this is very, very rich and fecund in this episode. Lots of good points for you to grow your own ideas out of.
So yes, listeners, grow your own ideas. Give us those ideas. Make your own podcast. Submit a comment on our podcast.
Or if you want us to cover a question, we're always up for that sort of thing too.
Send us your questions. We will put up once these are up on the internet. I'm sorry I haven't got around to it, but you're listening to it, so I don't need to apologize to you because you have the episode now.
We're still setting up the infrastructure for everything.
That's right, but we will put up an email for you to send us questions, and we'll do all that stuff, and we want to hear from you.
If we think we can get 30, 45 minutes out of it, I think we should be able to cover it. We can do like a grab bag sort of thing eventually.
So, and so let's see. If you have negative feedback for us, tell us. If you have positive feedback for us, tell your friends.
If you hate my voice, tell me what I'm doing wrong with it. I would like to know.
And with that, I think we're going to sign off. I've been Josh Trelevin.
I've been Ryan Kirkby as usual.
Okay, send us money.
Take care.